BMW's second generation X3 is a premium compact 4x4 that's a larger, plusher and more powerfully efficient choice than its predecessor, stacking up impressively against prestigiously badged alternatives from Audi and Volvo in this sector. Like its rivals, dynamically targeted almost exclusively towards on-road use, it's another example of just how car-like a model of this kind can be. It isn't often that BMW gets it wrong, and even when it does, it usually manages to turn a profit. Their original X3 compact 4x4 was a case in point. Launched in 2004 to more affordably extend the reach of this Bavarian brand's road-biased SUV model range, following the success of the larger, all-conquering X5. But early X3s felt cheap, rode poorly, and even by the modest tarmac-orientated standards of the class, were woefully short of any kind of off-road ability. Later versions were better, but what was really needed, especially in a newly christened sports activity vehicle market, crammed with premium alternatives, was something much classier, much more X5-like. Something indeed like the car we first saw at the end of 2010, this one, the second generation X3. Sure enough, this design is the size of a first generation X5. It's built at the X5's US Spartanburg factory, and the claim is that it rides and feels just like that car, a model that really defines a BMW X-rated model range that these days starts with the crossover Qashqai Class X1 and extends beyond this X3 to much larger Mercedes M-Class and Audi Q7 sized X5 and X6 models. But it's the X3 that really ought to mop up the majority of the sales, provided that being larger, plusher, more capable and more efficient will enable it to see off tough premium compact 4x4 rivals like Audi's Q5 and Volvo's XC60. Let's check it out. Settle behind the wheel and get ready to punch the starter button, and you've that pleasant compromise between a perch that's higher than it would be in an ordinary saloon, yet still low enough to make you feel part of the whole driving experience. Now, the X3 range is an all-diesel affair these days, and though BMW has developed more powerful units than the 4-cylinder 2-litre D model that I'm driving here, virtually all sales will be of this one. You can see why. Rest to 60 in 8.5 seconds on the way to a top speed of 131 miles an hour is about as fast as most people will want to go in a car of this kind. Yet this kind of vigorous performance doesn't get in the way of a set of class-leading running cost figures, as we'll see later. Now, BMW is keen to tell us about this model's X-Drive permanent four-wheel drive technology, but as you might expect, the sales patter is mainly occupied with the way that it can make this compact 4x4 handle just like a BMW 3 Series sports saloon. Doubtless, the way that this electronically controlled system can distribute torque to all four wheels depending on the grip available at either front or rear would be useful in a snowy snap. Apparently though, it's really there to make everyday tarmac motoring that bit more enjoyable, helping to control the car through bends by, in true BMW style, sending more power rearwards, and even lightly braking the inside rear wheel during tight cornering to improve mid-bend agility and traction. As for the rocky ride that owners of the original version of this model might remember, well, things are much improved here, thanks to a redesigned independent setup that's much more compliant. Indeed, it's one that you can exercise some control over yourself if you tick the extra cost box for the variable damper control that's part of the BMW Drive Dynamics control system. And it gives you a choice of normal, sport and sport plus modes via this button down here by the gear stick, allowing the electronics to change the character of the engine response, the throttle settings and the threshold of the DSC stability control system. Now, the variable damper control setup also affects the weight of the power steering, which you might feel will make the further extra cost options of Servotronic or variable ratio sport steering unnecessary. These vary the steering, making it finger light in parking, but giving it extra feel through corners. I should also mention that the variable damper control system can also alter the characteristics of the optional 8-speed automatic transmission, the gearbox that most buyers will probably choose, and the one I'm using here. Try the satisfyingly slick 6-speed manual box before committing to it though. What else? Well, refinement is exemplary on the motorway, while at the other extreme, this car will quite happily cope with the kind of muddy tracks that don't trouble the relatively shallow ground clearance. And in the unlikely event that you find yourself tackling a steepish, slimy slope, the hill descent control will enable you to pick your way carefully down it. To fit more neatly into the gap between the X1 and the X5, this X3 has grown a little in second generation guise, 78mm longer and 28mm wider, yet rather impressively also running out 25 kilograms lighter. As importantly, it loses the rather gawky looks of the Mark I model in favour of a far more cohesive piece of design that looks lower and more purposeful, differentiated from its larger X5 stablemate by squared off front headlamps and this deep character line scalloped into the side flanks. Thunking shut one of the doors is your first clue as to the quality improvements that have doubtless been part of the move from contracting out production of the old car to Magna Steyr in Austria to producing the new one in-house at BMW's Spartanburg plant in the US. Now this cabin certainly feels like one befitting a £30,000 car, and significant enhancements to the leg and the headroom that you get in this Mark II design mean that two adults can now be very comfortably seated in the rear, provided that they don't have to share the space with a centrally mounted third person who, thanks to the proximity of this transmission tunnel, can only really be comfortable on shorter journeys. Now the rear bench itself hasn't any fancy sliding, reclining or removable tricks, but you can change its 60-40 split folding arrangement to a 40-20-40 setup for a bit more flexibility, should you feel the need to extend this 550 litre loading bay to 1500 litres by pushing these rear chairs forward. So yes, whether you want to transport dogs, flat pack furniture or even a mountain bike with both wheels attached, it will probably fit. There's also a shallow underfloor boot area compartment here for keeping valuables away from prying eyes. At the wheel, the dash and the seating position are just tall enough for your perch to feel SUV-like, and the leather-lined, beautifully finished cabin feels an upmarket place to be, dominated by its standard 6.5-inch colour iDrive display screen, which you can upgrade to 8.8 inches in size by opting for BMW's professional multimedia package. The iDrive controller is down by the gear stick here, with extra buttons to make it easier for you to find everything from navigation to telephone controls. Then wasn't the original idea of iDrive to reduce button clutter? Whatever. Over 80% of X3 sales will be of the 2-litre D variant that I've been driving here. And for that you're looking at pricing in around the £32,000 to £34,000 bracket, depending on your preference between manual or automatic transmission, and assuming that you don't go ticking too many options list boxes. Now, don't go, in other words, comparing this car to more conventional soft-roading compact 4x4s like Toyota's RAV4 or Honda's CR-V. This BMW competes in an altogether more exalted section of the compact soft-roading market. Upmarket versions of Land Rover's Freelander might be seen as rivals, but this car really competes against more tarmac-orientated competitors like Audi's Q5 or Volvo's XC60. Now, at first glance, something like a Q5 2-litre TDI 170 would seem to save you about £2,000 on the X3 2-litre D. But that's before you take account of the fact that the Audi is about 20% slower from 0 to 60, yet still not as frugal. What about an XC60 then? Well, to match this BMW's performance, you'd need the fastest 225 brake horsepower D5 diesel version of that car, and in that case you'd be saddled with a much higher set of running costs. Whichever X3 variant you choose, and there's a sporty M Sport option if you find the standard version too reserved, you should find a longer equipment list than you might be expecting, even at the kind of money being asked here. Leather upholstery, alloy wheels, 2-zone air conditioning, front and rear parking sensors, auto headlamps and wipers and cruise control are all included, as well as the usual executive niceties, as is the iDrive system's colour screen. Desirable options include a head-up display system that projects information onto the inside of the windscreen in front of you, a full-length glass roof, and a reversing camera with a top view feature that gives you a 360-degree view around the car. Safety-wise, there are the usual twin front, side and curtain airbags, plus all the normal electronic traction, stability and braking systems there to ensure that hopefully you'll never use them. There's even an energy-absorbing bonnet with deformation zones to try and improve pedestrian protection. Let's put this into perspective. Here's a 184 brake horsepower compact 4x4 with a gross weight of 2.3 tonnes that uses less fuel and puts out fewer emissions than a 60 brake horsepower 1.2 litre Fiat Panda 4x4 weighing half as much. Such is BMW's achievement with this car. Against more natural competitors like Volvo's XC60 or Audi's Q5, this X3 2-litre D model's 50.4 miles to the gallon combined cycle fuel return is easily class leading, as is its CO2 emissions figure of 149 grams per kilometre. It actually improves slightly if you go for the automatic transmission. Now these figures look even better if you take account of the fact that you'd need a more powerful engine in rival models to keep up with the fast-driven X3. Whichever gearbox they opt for, buyers will get all the benefits of the Munich maker's efficient dynamics technology, which includes a seamless stop-start system which cuts the engine when you're in heavy traffic or waiting at the lights. What else? Insurance is Group 28 and residual values should be strong, BMW predicting that this car will retain up to 43% of its value after 3 years. Company car drivers will also be pleased to find that this car has the lowest benefit in kind charges in its segment too. This X3 has really come of age in second generation guise. If it struggles to match the profitability of its forgettable predecessor, then that'll only be because competition is so much tougher in the premium compact 4x4 sector these days. It is an immeasurable improvement over the Mark I model in every possible way. Even the best of this car's prestige rivals struggle to match this one's hugely impressive blend of performance and efficiency. It rides impressively, it feels upmarket, and thank goodness, on tarmac it drives just as a BMW should. All of which means that buyers in this sector who can afford the asking price should find that this X3 adds up very nicely indeed, assuming that they don't prioritise off-road ability, of course. But then in that case, it's tempting to ask whether a larger but more conventional two-wheel drive BMW 520d Touring Estate for the same kind of money wouldn't be a better bet. It all comes down to personal preference, of course, and I'm guessing that it's a choice you'll enjoy making.